Hari Om. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Samasta Janakalyani Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahmavitwaram. Om Sri Chinmaya Sadgurave Namaha. Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Cha Vaidyakena Yopakarottam Pravaram Munina Patanjali Pranjalina Natosmi. Hari Om. We are in the fourth Kaivalya Pada of Patanjali Yoga Sutra. We have seen in the Samadhi Pada how the consciousness travels from the lowest, which is our life, slowly towards the higher and higher levels. How do we achieve it? We saw it in Sadhana Pada. While traveling through different levels of consciousness, what are the new revelation that the yogi gets and the siddhis that he obtains at each level of consciousness is what we saw in Vibhuti Pada. Kaivalya Pada is on the basics or the fundamentals of the journey that the yogi takes from the lowest to the highest. And one of the fundamental questions that yogi tackles is a question that is considered to be of vital importance to all the philosophies, may it be Western or Eastern. The question is about idealism versus realism. Pratyayavad versus Yathartathavad. Now, what does this mean? A very simple question asked to us by our own intellect, if one is inquisitive enough, is, I see a thing, so it exists, or the thing exists, so I see it. This question puts us into a thinking mode. Right now, I am aware of people listening, I am talking, there's an air that is moving around me, there is some sound made by the sparrows outside. All this is actually existing, or is it a picture that is painted by my mind? The fact is, that which your mind is not focusing upon, that where your mind is not involved, you're not aware. For example, right now, I'm not aware of my younger brother because I'm speaking on Yoga Shastra. No, that doesn't mean that my younger brother is not existing. But he exists in my mind when I think about him. If I don't think about him, he doesn't exist. So does that mean that every time what I think only exists? This has a lot of bearing, because in order to know how Atman or a Purusha is reached, we've all heard about it cannot be described. Brahman is beyond description. Neti Neti is the word that is used. But why this is said so, we have never gone into the depth of it. Why it is absolutely impossible to describe Atman. Why? We are going to reach that destination through the discussion of idealism versus realism. Is it an idea that exists in my mind, so I see it as world? Or is it that the world has its own existence and I see the part of it? Our experience tells us that where the mind is not, I know not. Where the mind is, I know. Now that puts us into a lot of questions. One is, does an object has independent existence or not? I have a car. Is it my idea that I have a car and I perceive it in my mind? Or the car has independent existence by itself? Because when I don't think about the car, it doesn't exist. So when I'm not thinking about something, or when I'm not applying my mind, or in more Shastriya paribhasha, when my chitta is not Vishaya Karitva Purna, then where does the Vishaya go? Does it come when I think and goes when I don't think and has no existence by itself? This may sound a little absurd, but it has a lot of philosophical background. Because our mind may say, how can you say this? Because I talk to my wife every day, I talk to my children every day, I talk to my friends every day, I go to the office, and you all call this as an idea in the mind? Yes, sir. As a part of philosophy, all that you do can be ideation of your mind. You may feel it real. That's a different question. It is a perception. You may perceive it as real. You may perceive it as authentic, but that's your perception, because it is vouchsafed as authentic by your own mind. Then the question comes, if I am ideating about these things, how is it possible that my wife is also ideating about me? She can. So it's all interplay of ideations that we are doing. Is that the truth? Or there is absolutely independent existence of everything, and I come to know about the thing when I apply my mind on it. A mountain is there, irrespective of whether I see it or not, or it comes into the existence when I see it. One may say that, oh, you are not seeing it, but somebody else also saw it. Fine, because that is a time when he ideated the mountain, so it came in front of him. In other words, it is possible, or is it possible, that there is no independent existence for anything in this world, but the world is entirely a creation of mind working on the objects and creating and painting the picture. Or, irrespective of all the minds in the world, there is a separate existence for the world. Those who take the side of the fact that everything exists only in mind are called idealist or idealism. Those who believe that no, the world has independent existence irrespective of the minds who are perceiving it is called realism or yatharthavad. Is it a pratyaya idea or is it an actual existence? This is the subject of 15th Sutra, which says, Vastu samye chitta bhedat yo vibhaktaha panthaha. The meaning is, even though an object is one, the knowledge being different, it is clear that the object and the knowledge of the object are two different paths. That's the literal meaning of the sutra. What does this mean? Patanjali Maharaj takes a position that the idealism is not true. There is independent existence for everything, irrespective of what your mind thinks about it. However, you come to know about the object to the extent you apply the mind. In other words, Patanjali Maharaj has taken a position harmonizing idealism and realism. How that is possible and how it is so is the subject of 15th Sutra. What does that sutra mean? An object and the knowledge of the object, these are two different things. Now we are getting into the details of how object is perceived. Let us take any object, a stone. Now, when I look at the stone, I call it as a stone, and it has a shape which is roundish in nature. It's slightly dusty color. So there are dharmas, characteristics of the object, which my mind notices, my chitta perceives the shape, the dharma that is characteristic of the object in my mind. So what is my knowledge about the perceived object? My knowledge is, it is a stone, because that's the common name given by everyone to that object. It is called stone, so I am also calling it stone. So nama, it is roundish in color, dusty and heavy, etc. Dharma. So nama and a rupa of that particular object is known to me. So my perception is limited to only this extent about the object. I perceive a woman as, oh, she's this height, fair color, beautiful, this, that, etc. This is my perception about a thing called a woman. All right. And this is a knowledge. This perception, seeing that thing, has resulted into a creation of a knowledge set or knowledge. Jnana, vastu jnana. So vastu and vastu jnana, these are two different things. Now one may say, how it can be different? Vastu jnana itself is vastu because I described that vastu. So that jnana and vastu is same. It is not. Why? Because vastu by itself has its own existence. Jnanam coming out of that vastu depends on the capacity of my mind to perceive it, one. And second, I shall know a thing to the extent my chitta has applied itself to the object. Let's take an example. A lady is walking on the road and a kami or a lustful person is looking at her, and a sadhu is looking at her. Now, both minds are applied for the perception of an object. But what is the perceived knowledge? Perceived knowledge of a kamuk person, kami, or a lustful person is that it is an object of gratification. So his rajoguna is in ascendancy, tamoguna is assisting it, sattoguna is virtually absent. While a sadhu would look at it as, oh, she is a Devi walking on the road. So the same object has colored his mind with sattva guna when he perceived it. So two people perceived the same thing, but got the knowledge different. Now the question is, if the object is same, how the knowledge can be two? If knowledge cannot be two, that itself means the knowledge of an object and the object are different things. That would also come to a corollary or a logic that we shall never be able to perceive an object in its entirety unless we make an attempt to know the object in entirety. Let us say theory of relativity. Everyone knows that name called theory of relativity, and everybody talks about it, that Einstein postulated the theory. All right. So what is your knowledge about that theory? Oh, he has postulated theory of relativity, and the knowledge ends there. But a physicist who studies the theory of relativity, his knowledge is different than our knowledge of theory of relativity. So what happened? The object called theory of relativity remained same. The perceived knowledge is of different level. Now again, whether Einstein perceived it in the same manner as others are perceiving or not is again a question. There could be some uniformity about the perceived knowledge or the perception, but that doesn't mean that all the perceptions are same. Everybody's perception or perceived knowledge is bound to be different than the other. That puts a question to us. Does that mean that we will never get the actual and the correct factual knowledge of the object in its entirety? One can. In fact, Yoga Shastra is based on the simple fundamental principle that we do not know the nature or the real nature of any object, and an attempt when it is made to know the nature of an object through the art of concentration on the object, then same technique can be applied on each object of the universe, and the entire creation will be known to us in its real nature. A little concentration, the object appears different because the perceived knowledge goes higher. A little more concentration, the perceived knowledge goes little higher. And when the knowledge starts moving higher, meaning when the consciousness starts throwing more and more light, the access is given to the larger portion of consciousness through the object. You're doing an art of concentrating on an object. But factually what is happening is you are widening the amount of consciousness that you have. So you keep on doing arohana, going upwards on the different levels of consciousness. Now at each level of consciousness, you push the boundary and you become aware of a new aspect of the object. Now you don't call it a stone anymore. You say, no, there is also a vibration there in the stone. Perhaps it has similar consciousness. That means our ideas about the perception of an object is changing with every unfoldment of consciousness or pushing the boundaries of consciousness. Meditation is an art of pushing the boundaries of consciousness by utilizing the best instrument called buddhi, the ability of one to concentrate the chitta on the object at the exclusion of all other objects. Condition is only one. Exclude all other objects. Concentrate on an object. In other words, go deep into the object so that more details of the object would be known to you. As you start penetrating into the details of the object, a newer and a higher level of consciousness is exposed to you, a new experience is experienced, and that gives a ability to control. For example, at a normal, ordinary level, if we look at a stone which is round, then that knowledge helps us in pushing the stone and it will keep on rolling down. So your ability to push the stone to roll it down came from the knowledge that a roundish object can be rolled. So you got a siddhi. Since everybody has it, we don't call it siddhi. But how do you know that this stone will roll? It is an awareness about the object. Because you're concentrated on the shape or the size of an object, a roundish and a round thing, because you have a knowledge that a round thing rolls, you could push it and roll it. So it is called something normal because everybody does it. Similarly, as we move upward in the consciousness, certain other characteristics of that stone or the object we come to know, which others are not knowing. So they call it as miracle or chamatkar, while a yogi calls it as a siddhi. I have become siddha about a new power in me. It's not a new power in him. It is the new power of the higher level of consciousness. So that means whenever we see an object, the object is seen by the eyes, but all the indriyas are secondary in nature. They have no value. They simply bring the object within the scope of perception. That's all. Wherever the eyes go, you see. So all the objects come under the visual perception limits. That's fine. That's the only function the eye does. It is the chitta which goes through the eyes and takes the shape of that object which is to be perceived. This is called tadakaritva. So if I have to see a stone, first thing is that my chitta should go out through my chakshu, the eyes, reach the stone, take the shape of that stone. In other words, the consciousness in the stone, two consciousness meet each other, and the knowledge is brought back to the chitta saying that it is a stone. Although it is being described very simply, there is a complete dedicated grantha on Vritti Jnana Rahasya. Vritti Jnana Rahasya entirely, or Vritti Prabhakar, is a grantha which deals with how things are perceived. It's a detailed knowledge. We are not right now interested in it. But the fact is that chitta takes the tadakaritva, the shape of the vishayakaritva it becomes, and then we perceive the vishaya. Now the question is, depending upon which phase or which state the chitta is, perception changes. This is the funnier part of perception. The object remains the same, but it is perceived in a different way. The jnanam that is obtained from, and this all jnanam that we are talking is called vritti jnanam, jnana through mind. The real jnana is different than this. The vritti jnanam we are talking about. Vritti means it has to be antakarana or chitta vritti. So the chitta, when it gets engaged with the objects in the world, the jnanam that you derive varies with the state of the chitta. If the state of the chitta is in sattva guna, the same object appears differently. If the state of the chitta is in mudha avastha, it appears differently. That means an object can give sukham if we look at it from dharma apekshayam. Dharma apekshayam, that there is a poor man and he should be fed, and so that his hunger is satisfied, and that gives me pleasure. This is called dharma apekshayam, punya karma. So punya karma gives sukham. Now what has happened? It is the same beggar begging because he's very, very hungry. My chitta looked at the beggar and perceived the beggar, and the jnanam that came out in my mind is that he is hungry, I must feed him. So it is called dharma apekshaya chittam. Now the same antakaran is looking towards the beggar as a god asking for alms, and I must be serving him. So dharma apekshaya, this leads to sukham. Adharma apekshaya, this bloody beggar has come here and he's unnecessary, he's such a dirty person, he should be kicked out from this place, I must shout at him. Adharma apekshaya dukkham. Now same beggar, same object, chitta has become rajogunatmaka. Then there is a third person who is simply not bothered that beggar is standing there. Theek hai, what to do, let him sit there, I'm not connected with him. ऐसे लोग आते हैं जाते हैं, people keep coming, he is begging. Avidya apekshaya mudhata, because tamoguna is now in ascendancy. This man is just lying idle and he's not interested in, not even thinking about him, good, bad. This is called avidya apekshayam mudhata is the result. He's not getting sukham or dukkham, but he's mudhata, stupefied about the whole issue. Again, his chitta is avidya apekshayam. And when a sadhu comes, sadhu looks at this particular person, feels that he should be fed, but he is not emotional about it. Because for him, the begging person, the normal person, the rich person, the poor person, all are same. So, samyak jnana apekshayam madhyastha. Madhyastha means no opinion, unequivocal. So what happened? One beggar created 4 different chittas. So that means vastu samme, chitta bhed. Chitta bhed means dharma pradhana chitta, adharma pradhana chitta, avidya pradhana chitta, samyak jnana pradhana chitta. Depending upon how we look at the thing, each chitta will be holding different knowledge about the object. Now the question comes, which one of these is the true picture of the object? 4 different chittas we saw looking at the same object called beggar. Which one of this is true? All of these are true, but all of these are not complete, including the sadhu. Why? That is because depending upon the chitta's current state, you perceive the object. Only when chitta is not perceiving anything, only when chitta is not perceiving anything in this world, that is the time you will have complete and correct knowledge of all the objects in the world. Let's try to understand this statement. Every time I employ my mind or antakaran or chitta to this world, I shall be getting the perceived knowledge to the extent of ability of my chitta to perceive the object. A stupid person like us, we perceive the things as different. That she's my wife, that is a lady, this is a car, this is a mobile. This is our lowest level of perceived knowledge of this world, and everybody is into this. That is why we are all interacting with each other as if this is the only level of knowledge. Compared to a person who has never studied any books and not gone to the school, the one who is a professor is definitely at a higher perception level, simply because he has developed the faculty of his chitta to perceive the knowledge at a higher level. So that is the reason why when an object is given to a uneducated person, he will say, oh, this is a paperweight. But a physicist might say that, no, this is just a glass, and what it actually constitutes is atomic particles. What has happened? The perception has changed because he has studied the object and developed his consciousness to a level whereby his consciousness has gone one step beyond the uneducated person. In the similar manner, the perception that we have and the perception that the yogi starts getting as he moves upwards into the higher levels of realms of consciousness tells us one thing, that the knowledge keeps on widening. How long it will widen? It will reach a stage when there is no perception happening. Now the question is, if perception is not happening, how the knowledge will come? Because without perception, you cannot get knowledge. The real knowledge is unperceived, intuitive knowledge. Unless we cross the boundary of perception, you cannot know the true nature of an object. That is the fundamental postulate. Based on the fact that there are levels of perceptions, each level as we move upwards becoming more and more refined. That is why the word used pashyati in Sanskrit, dhyana vastit yad gaten manasa pashyanti yam yogino. The yogi is what they see in dhyana vasta. And what they see means what they perceive. You refine your perception about the object. That is the main purpose, reason, and process of meditation. Taking a minuscule 1% perception of an object and taking that as true and behaving accordingly is the problem of all of us. The moment you see a woman, oh, she's a woman, the perception is over. And then you start building ideas around it. The moment you see the food, you say, this is a food I have to eat. It has got to taste such a fine thing. That day when I ate, and immediately you create ideas around it. You are creating ideas around a minuscule percentage of perceived knowledge. That is not the true object. Udara bharana nohe janije yajna karma. Udara bharana, food is nothing else but Brahman. That is what the scripture says. We never see it as Brahman. We see it as what? Such a delicacy. Why? That is because perception of our food is, oh, that is a chapati. It is 1% perception of what is coming in front of. The true perception of that would come only when, as you start moving upwards. Even a small thing. Moment the same food that you eat in the home is given in the temple as prasadam, your attitude towards the food changes. See, the mind now perceives it in a different way. Even the alcohol that is given at Kala Bhairav Mandir as a prasadam, you take it. Because now the perception about the object had changed. So far, it is something that is to be avoided. It is bad. It is stupefying. It is against the society. All those are mental constructs about the minuscule perception of an object. That means it all depends on the chitta's ability to perceive an object to get the correct knowledge of this world. Higher the development of the chitta, better the understanding of the world. And that is the reason why the world is made up of three gunas. The perceiving apparatus, chitta, is also made up of three gunas. Although it is made up of three gunas, the parinama ekatvat, it appears ultimately as effect, as a parinam, as one effect, either good, bad, happy, sorrowful, etc. When my chitta is imbued with sattva guna, I see all the objects in this world as beautiful, nice, good. I feel compassionate. When my chitta is imbued with the rajoguna, I see this whole world is to be made use of for myself. When my chitta is imbued with tamoguna, I feel like destroying what is there in this universe. That means how your chitta will interact with an object in the universe depends on which guna you have in the chitta and which guna you see in the object. Because guna is, the object is made up of three gunas, chitta is made up of three gunas. If sattva interacts with this sattva, there is sattva patti. If rajoguna interacts with the rajoguna, rajoguna utpatti. This is what precisely in Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan says, Tattva vittim tu mahabhavo guna karma vibhaga yoho guna guneshu vartante iti matva na sajjate. The yogi or the vairagi or the sannyasi doesn't get attached because of this. Now, if this is the issue, then it puts us a question to ourselves. I saw a paperweight, and you say that that is just a minuscule percentage of the perceived knowledge of a paperweight. So what is the real nature of the paperweight then? Because my perception of a woman is different, Pradeepji's is different, this is different, but the true perception of a woman is completely different. That means we will never ever come to know the true nature of any object in the universe. This is exactly the question in the sutra, which is 16th. Nacha ekachitta tantram vastu tad pramanakam tada kim syat. If every object has different perceived knowledge, then what is the true knowledge of an object? One. And second, I come to know about a thing only when my chitta interacts with that object. And when I'm not interacting, what happens to the object? It is not a mind construct. If it is completely a mind construct, then what will happen? Every time I think, the mind appears. Every time I don't think, the object disappears. So if the object has no existence by itself, then what will happen? When I want to eat food, food will appear because it is an ideation. When I don't want to eat food, food will disappear. It's an ideation. If that is the true case, then when I say food, the food should come in front of me. It doesn't come. Khayali pulao, what you think as food, and bhogan, the actual food, they are different. But when I'm not thinking about food, does a food have existence by itself even when I'm not thinking about it? And the same corollary, when it is extended further, a big question emerges, and that question is whether this world is existing by itself even when my chitta is not there. All the chittas are removed. All the chittas. And what is chitta? It is nothing else but the reflector of consciousness. So if all the chittas are removed from the world, objects will be there or not? The object will be there. There will be no perceivers left. Again, it's a flight of imagination, but it has a relevance. That means Srujanata, creation by Bhagavan, is an existing thing. Me as a chitta, me as a person partaking into this universe, partakes the universe to the ability of my chitta. But the true universe is something far beyond comprehension of me. That is why way I see the world, way another person sees the world, way a jnani sees a world, way a yogi sees a world is vastly different than each other. That means we have no idea of how the universe truly is. When a statement is made that Krishna Rasa Leela is a Nitya Leela, every moment Krishna Rasa Leela is going on. That is what in Bhakti Shastra it is said. We say how it can be. I went to Mathura, Vrindavan, there's nothing there. You are not able to perceive it because your chitta is limited. It cannot stretch itself to encompass the experiences which are there at a level of objective universe. Unless the subject and the object has become one, सितारों के आगे मका और भी है. A Sufi says, this what you are seeing is an absurd, minuscule representation of universe that you are in. And you have made rules in that universe, and you feel this is what the world is all about. That means the object continues to be there even if it is not perceived because it has its own existence. That means for an object to come into picture of our mind or the chitta has to be applied to the object. Tad uparagapekshitva chittasya vastu jnata ajnatam. Tad uparaga apekshitva chittasya vastu jnata ajnatam. An object is jnat or ajnat depending upon uparaga, involvement of the chitta. Uparaga is precisely what happens when the sponge is soaked into the water, the whole water comes into the sponge. Similarly, the chitta or the mind, when applied to the object colors the chitta. Uparaga. So, when Jnanendriya acts as a medium for establishing contact of an object, then the chitta does the akara grahana of that object. And this akara grahana is called tadakaraka karita. Tadakara karita. That means that shape being taken by the mind. So for a object to exist in the mind or the chitta has to employ itself through the indriyas on the object and take the shape of that object to cognize or perceive the object. That means there are two ways of looking at a thing. One is through the chitta, one is without the chitta. Now we are coming to the point that is under consideration. One is through the chitta. When antakaran or the chitta or the mind is applied to an object, yes, you do come to know about the object. But mind cannot be applied to all the objects at the same time and all the objects can be perceived at the same time. It can be perceived. Yogi does that. When he goes to the higher levels, through the same chitta, he is able to perceive everything. He's still using chitta. But chitta kruta, through the mind, the perception is different. And without the mind, the perception is different. What is the nature of perception without the mind? And can it be called perception? Because perception presupposes mind. Because we don't have any word, because we're only used to the knowledge through perception. So we don't have a word for knowledge without perception. It's called intuition. That is the closest word used in English. Sanskrit, it is called Jnatrutva. To know without the involvement of mind. Think about the concept. Because moment the mind is there to obtain the knowledge cannot be complete. Why? There is a limitation in the chitta to know an object. And what is the limitation? A chitta has inherent incapacity to hold the object and leave the object. You may have the experience of an object in your mind stored as memory. That is a different thing. But when you eat food, this knowledge that I am eating food becomes vismrutavan. It's gone. Next day, you remember that you ate the food yesterday, but it's a memory. You are not having the actual experience that you experienced at the time of eating. It is gone into the form of memory. So that means mind sometimes is aware of this, sometimes is aware of that, sometimes is aware of another thing. That means there is a patchy awareness of the mind. The mind is aware of that where it is employed. He is not aware of that where it is not employed. Let us take deep sleep. The mind itself is not there. What happens? It's not employed anywhere, no knowledge. Oh, it's employed on a dream. There is a knowledge of dream. When you are having the knowledge of the dream things, you are not having knowledge of your house because you are in dream state. That means whichever object preoccupies the stage of the chitta, that is the one which fills the chitta. So mind is always aware of one thing, but definitely not aware of all the things. Then who is the one who is aware of all the things? Mind is jnatam, adjnatam. Something is known, something is not known. Only when everything is simultaneously known, then we can say there is a complete perception or a complete knowledge. Sometimes present, sometimes absent is a vritti jnana. Chitta jnana, antakaran doing that. That is why the 18th Sutra of Patanjali Maharaj states, Sada jnatas chitta vrittyasta prabho purushasya aparinamitvat. Sada jnata chitta vrittayah tat prabho purushasya aparinamitvat. The one who enlightens the mind to perceive the things is the one which has complete awareness of all the chitta vrittis. Now, let's try to get little more details about this. I saw Pradeep ji in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I met Himanshu ji. Now, two persons, two objects I saw, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. What is my chitta has done? In the morning, my chitta physically perceived Pradeep ji and got the knowledge of Pradeep ji. When I met Himanshu ji in the afternoon, my chitta is now employed on Himanshu ji. At that point of time, Pradeep ji is out of my mind. Unless I sit and remember him. Again, that means I have to employ the chitta there. So that means I am only aware of that thing where my mind is engaged. My chitta is creating vrittis. But the witness of this mind, the consciousness that makes the chitta possible to perceive, with him it is not the same thing. He is aware in the morning when you met, that is completely as an awareness kept by the Purusha. Afternoon when emotions met, that is also kept, because that means the Purusha, the illuminating thing, the consciousness is constantly aware of all the perception, not sometimes aware and sometimes not aware. The difference between the Purusha and the Chitta. Chitta itself, first of all, cannot perceive. Chitta borrows the light from the Purusha to perceive, that we have seen. But even that borrowed light by the Chitta is used in a patchy manner to know the things in the world. However, the Purusha that illuminates the Chitta is constantly aware of all the modifications of the Chitta, so he is constantly aware and knowledgeable about all the things that the Chitta perceives. The Chitta may forget, the consciousness doesn't. There is a classical case in psychiatry. It's a known disease. It's a known condition. That condition is very nice analogy for us to understand. There is a lady who drives a car, and suddenly at the signal, she watches that there is a serious accident that took place. It happens in front of her eyes. She is not involved into the accident at all. There is an accident happening at the signal, and there was some blood. There was some guy who fell down, and the ambulance came, and then they took the person with a bloody face to the hospital, etc. She just watches that. Now what happens? The Chitta perceived the accident, and then after that the traffic was online, and then she moved towards her house and everything is fine. Now look at the things. She saw something which she perceived at that point of time, and then she moved on with her life. After 6 months, maybe 1 year, she starts feeling scared. She's scared of going out. She doesn't want to leave the house. She's extremely afraid. This condition in psychiatry is called post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. To give an example, in Afghanistan war, the US Marines, now supposed to be the most toughest soldier in the world, they are very, very hard-minded, strong-minded people. They went in Afghanistan, killed people, terrorists, etc., whatever. They came back after the assignment was over, and after 1 year, got admitted in the hospital, many of them. And what was the complaint? Sir, I'm afraid. Now imagine a Marine with a strong mind is feeling like a small child afraid, PTSD condition. Now what happened? At the point of time when he killed somebody or saw some accident, the perception was there and the Chitta forgotten the perception. It was recalled back after 1 year and created a different impact on the mind. That means when it happened, the impact was not there. Sometime after the incidents, a recall of the incidents created an impact. That means Chitta sometimes holds the thing and sometimes doesn't hold the thing. What it holds is its current preoccupation. However, the Purusha behind it is witness of the accident, witness of the recall. That means the consciousness is conscious of the cognitions that are taking place in the Chitta all the time. And why it is so? What is the difference? Because Purusha or the consciousness is the master, Swami, Prabhu of the Chitta, and it is his own reflection in the Chitta that is making us aware. That is why the mirror reflected the sunlight and something was happening in the reflected mirror's light. So the mirror is aware of only the light that is reflected and things happening in that light. However, for the sun, he is aware of many such mirrors and their reflected lights and the activities happening in their reflected lights. That is how Purusha perceives everything. Now, how it is possible that the reflected light is not able to perceive everything while the original light is able to perceive everything? The difference lies in parinamitva. What is parinamitva? In the chitta, the light undergoes the modification called vritti. It is the modification by the mind of the consciousness that leads to limited perception. If the chitta does not modify the consciousness, then we will come to know the things in their true sense. Why? Because then there will be direct perception by the consciousness without the help of the chitta. The consciousness or the supreme light doesn't undergo any modification, aparinamitvat. But the reflected light in the antakarana undergoes modification. Why it undergoes modification? Because of gunas. Why the gunas? Because of the karma. So the karma leading to dharma, adharma, leading to papa, punya, leading to likes, dislikes, leading to different type of gunas, gunas formulating the chitta, giving rise to vritti, limiting the perception of the world, creating the whims and fancies about the world. But the one who has transcended all this, how do you transcend this? If the chitta is modifying every time the consciousness, then stop the modifications. Lesser the modifications of chitta, which in other words means lesser the vritti, more calmer the chitta, more calm and pristine the chitta, more consciousness flows into the chitta, more the limit of awareness. And how do you do that? By reducing the flutter or the modifications of the chitta. How do you reduce the modification of chitta? Shamadhi Shatakam or Ashtanga Yoga. So all the purpose of Shamadama or Viveka Vairagya is to reduce the modifications of the chitta so that chitta is able to perceive more and more, wider and wider, till a point where there is no width left. When one is able to widen the consciousness or the vrittis, the ability of buddhi or the chitta to the maximum, he is called Vyasa. That's the maximum. Beyond Vyasa is Parabrahma, Purusha. And Purusha never gets affected by the constituents of the universe or anything because aparinamitvat sakala jnanam. In fact, sakala jnanam is still secondary because the Purusha is in a state where there is no jnanam also. If there is no jnanam, then how Purusha knows? Because knowing in our case is modification of chitta, while knowing in case of Purusha is instantaneous because of swa-samvednyata. Now, what is this knowledge by or of Purusha, and what is the difference between him and the knowledge of the antakarana or the chitta is the subject matter of coming few sutras, so that we will come to know why the Vedas have been saying Neti Neti about Purusha, We all know that there is no description possible. It is Neti Neti. But why? That why is being discussed in next 3 or 4 sutras by Patanjali Maharaj. So it is enough at this moment to know that the world is perceived to the extent the mind perceives it through the chitta vritti. The objects in this universe or the universe itself has its own existence irrespective of whether mind is perceiving it or not. And the perception of the world in its true sense is possible only when the mind is, you're not working through the mind. That means if mind is subtracted, chitta is subtracted from the perception of the world, that means when the world is directly perceived by the consciousness, that is the true nature of the world existing or not existing. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
Thank you, Sanjay ji. We'll wait for some questions. Hari Om, Sanjay ji. This is Rajendran. I have just one question. This the ladder of this chitta vritti is so stunning. It is so wonderfully explained. But when I am thinking about the food only when I am hungry. Otherwise, I don't. So for the maintenance of my body, these type of thoughts are occurring, isn't it? But so for the manifestation of the Paramatma, this chitta vritti is required in a sense, isn't it? That is the reason it is happening.
Yes. This chitta vritti of the realized, for example, Gurudev also felt hungry. Every Jivan Mukta feels hungry, otherwise he will die. But awareness of the hunger in his case is called Badhita Chitta Vritti. Now, what is Badhita Chitta Vritti? Badhita means there is a badha that has happened about the Chitta Vritti. Now, to take an analogy, when we participate in the game of small children, are we not aware that it is a children's game, but still we participate into it, we play into it, and we play to the real extent, knowing fully well that this is children's play. Similarly, all the realized souls, Jivan Muktas, they participate in the worldly matters with the help of Chitta, but those vrittis do not obliterate their awareness of consciousness at any point of time. So it is like this. A king is coming down and trying to participate in some activity. He never forgets that he is a king, yet he is participating in an activity. A king, when he is talking to his own prince or the child, he is talking like a father, but he doesn't forget that he is a king. This is called Badhit Anuvrutti. It is like utilizing the vrittis for the sake of the Sharira. So when there is hunger, simultaneously the Jivan Mukta is aware that, oh, this body is feeling hungry. So this body should be fed by this thing called food. That is the only difference. So we see he is eating. But actually what is happening is he has already dissociated himself from the body. Knowing fully well that I am having a body, he says, oh body, please eat and feed yourself. That much amount of separatedness is there with the things that are existing through the chitta. This is called Badhit Anuvrutti. This is more explained in Jivan Mukta Vivek. Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Hari Om, Sanjay ji. Thank you for detailed explanation of today class. Intuition, I got the right meaning from you today to know without the involvement of mind. All along I was thinking, oh, it is something, some hyphen kind of thing. That's good. Now, you mentioned about some PTSD condition. It's a medical term, I guess. Can you explain to me at least on that, sir?
What happens is when you see a particular thing, we just see the visual aspect of it. So as I give an example of this lady watching an accident, it's like everybody watches, she also watched. So maybe around 100 people watched the accident. But one of them, when he goes home, after about 6 months, suddenly starts developing a different kind of reaction to that accident. And the reaction is of tremendous amount of fear. In fact, those US soldiers who returned from Afghan war, more than 10% are suffering from this condition. A Marine is, if we have gone through the manual of US Marines, they are the toughest soldiers in the world. And a person who in fact, there is a thing taken in writing from US Marines when they participate in their exercise, that for the deaths, the army is not responsible. That is how their training is. But such a strong person feels so intimidated that they do not even leave their room. They're so scared because of the one firing incidents and somebody died. That visual impression, because that time it was only perception, it created the impact after so many months. Now the question is, mind at the time of the accident was aware of the accident only. After some time, the recall of this created a different impact. That time the accident was not there, but the impact came. What it means is, mind perceives a thing at one point of time, leaves it there, perceives another thing at another time. This is typical of what is called a chitta vritti. While in case of Purusha, the accident, the after effect, this, that, everything he is aware. So that means Chitta is aware of the objects off and on. While the thing that is behind the Chitta, the Purusha, he is aware of all the changes of the Chitta, because he is the father or the Prabhu of the Chitta. So that is called Parinamitva, Aparinamitva. Hari Om.